starting to flood it now. Oh, Alan and Sarah.
Hey.
And wow. Murray from Thailand. You can't hear us, you're too far away, that's why. Can you see us? Murray? Put your audio on, Murray. Come on, you run a television program, you must know what you're doing.
Give him a little sign.
He can hear
I
me.
know he's smiling, so he can see. He can hear.
3, 4, 8, 12, halfway. Stephen Tyron's coming in. It should get a bit of a rush in a minute. Wow, here they come. Athol from Northern Territory. Can you hear us?
Loud and clear.
Oh, what a shame.
Good morning, all from
Hi.
Bangkok.
Good morning and
Hi.
good afternoon here. Hello, Sarah.
Hello.
Hello, Alan. I mean, Anthony. Alan.
G'day, Al.
Hi.
Hi, George.
Just saying, we've had 93 people look at the video since last Wednesday.
Brilliant.
Wow, that's good. Hi, George. Hi, everyone.
Well, you see, the thing is,
Hi, Sarah.
half of our
Hi.
participants are working. They're teaching or running shows, having to handle crises. So they're, you know, I've had quite a number of people sort of not abusing, but sort of very upset to say, I just cannot make it. I just had Karen Doyle who's the president of ACF and also with Le Cordon Bleu in Sydney. She just contacted me and said, look, I've just got to go. I've got a whole lot of students who are just being inducted and I just cannot make it. So anyway, the next one will be the same time, but the one after will be an evening gig. We'll just wait a few more minutes, 5 more minutes, I think. There we go, another one. Who is this? Ah, John Cregan.
Thanks, David.
Yeah.
Hi, Mark. How are you?
Long time no see, buddy. How you been?
Yeah, good. You looking well?
There he is.
Oh, thanks, mate.
Hang on.
Firing away.
Yeah, comfortable.
Yeah, got to be, mate. You got to be.
Julie Armstrong. Oh, Julie Armstrong.
Udo, good to see you again.
Okay.
Hey, how are you doing, mate?
Nice to mix bag. Yes, yeah.
This is all right, isn't it? The
Okay, I
reunion.
better go because I've just come onto this webinar and I have my camera on. Okay, thanks. Okay, bye. Bye. Alexa, stop.
We'll all know Alexa.
Sometimes she's a friend, sometimes she's not.
Yes, quick.
You can clear your background.
Yeah, what? What do you want? It's okay.
Hey, Murray, how are you?
G'day, Dale.
G'day,
Good,
Dale.
mate. Good. Just kicking back in sunny Bangkok, mate. All good?
Yeah, I'm freezing here in freezing Melbourne.
About 38, 36 to 38 today here. So hot,
Beautiful.
steamy.
Yeah, nice. Good on you.
Well, good to see you all.
Good to see you, Murray. Tell you what, it's pretty cold in Brisbane today too. We'll give Melbourne a run for its money pretty soon, I think.
We'll be having snow soon, Shane.
Yeah, for sure. There's a bit of a polar vortex coming through. It's days like that you need to be in the kitchen, hey?
Yeah.
I'll swap your Melbourne's cold for Brisbane's cold.
Yeah,
It's all relative, isn't it?
yeah, for sure.
Jeffrey. How are you, Jeff? Jeffrey, another one from sunny Queensland.
Oh, golly, he's going to complain.
Can you hear us, Jeffrey? Now he's still got a bit of an audio problem. He's on mute.
Oh.
Jeffrey, you're on mute. If you can hear me.
No, I can hear you.
Okay, we can hear you too. That's great.
How are you?
Ah, comme ci, comme ça. Etchy ketch, whichever language you take, 50-50. This way,
Sounds
that
good.
way. What else? Which other way do you want me to say it?
It's all good. It's all French.
Comme ci, comme ça. Okay.
Passive in here in Thailand. Passive.
Oh. Yes, the unfortunate thing is that, you know, when I started this thing off, I put out a survey and most people said Wednesday afternoons, but then a lot of people couldn't and a lot of people could. So I got a catch-22. Whatever time I put it on, whatever time we start, the first thing I try to do is to think of the presenters. They're the most important people because we can take a recording. And as I said, 93 people have looked at it, our last one, in the first week. So this one will be available to everybody who's registered from about Friday onwards. So you can, you know, look back and look at it. So, you know, that's where it'll come in useful because I do know a lot of people have contacted me you know, in the teaching career world and said, you know, how do they get onto it? And I said, look, you have to be registered. So, you know, that's the way some people are looking at it. That's going to be I think the main way of getting the message across or coming to you know, some kind of conclusion. One of the things that came out of last week, just before we actually start, was one of the fantastic things I think was there were more questions after the session than there were before. But one of the great things was everybody had almost the same questions. And I think the conversation was important because it makes people think about answers. And we're never going to come across, you know, everybody agreeing to the same thing. And also we'll have different opinions. But the important thing, I think, is to swap ideas and see what people think about things. And that's at least that's the way I see it anyway. Yeah. Well, we've got, I reckon, got 19. We should have 22, but some people might be coming in late. And I'm a stickler for time, so I think what I'd like to do is to start because we'll have the recording and people can catch up at the beginning of everything. Today's session is quite an important one, but first of all, I'd like to welcome Mark Normoyle, who is an AITC registered professional chef consultant. Shane Greenman, AITC professional chef and commercial chef, as well as a chef patisserie, small business operator, has got quite a broad experience like everybody else on the panel. We're very, very honored to have Rhonda Andrews, Managing Director of Barrington Centre. Barrington Centre is a specialist psychological organization, and Rhonda is an expert in critical incident management, which I think is what we really also should be looking at. And last but not least, wow, we are so lucky to be able to link to China. Alan Orreal has 34 years of global experience. He came into, or started off, I believe, in Melbourne, wasn't it, 10 years ago? And, you know, Alan is now Director of Culinary Operations at Shanghai Disney Resort in China. He leads a staff, a brigade of over 1,000 people, and he produces 11 million meals a year. So we're looking at someone who has got an incredible experience there. We're very welcome and privileged to have you, Alan, as we are the other people. Today's symposium, basically the question is what support or online resources will help cooks and chefs through this crisis. Just as a stimulus, they're not necessarily questions you need to answer because what we are more interested in is your own individual opinion. But how long, in your opinion, will this crisis take to bounce back tourism? In some cases, you're local, you may be able to answer your ideas. In other cases, answer it according to what you think your position is. What kind of online resources will help cooks and apprentices and chefs? cope with the pressures of underemployment, because I think unemployment is going to be fairly big. It already is. They estimate at least 1/3 of restaurants will drop out of their business for sure. So that means there's a hell of a lot of chefs going to be misplaced. A lot of apprentices won't get work and all that sort of stuff. You know, what else should chefs, administrators of associations place on their websites, or how can they help their members? What policies and standards can we introduce? What staff issues will executive chefs actually face post COVID-19? And how do they read signs? And this is what I'm particularly interested in, because it's all very well to sort of forecast what the sort of issues we may face. But, you know, what are the signs of those issues? I think that's an important one. And the other thing is, you know, what else can they do? For instance, AITC, as one organization, is going to personally contact every member on their membership roll just to ask how they are. Conversation is important, and to know that they are being cared about, or caring is there, and also to make sure they're okay, and anything for, you know, we can help. The order of presentation today, I'm going to ask Rhonda first, Mark, I always believe in ladies first, by the way, Mark, then Shane, and then Alan, to give us their idea in about 5 to 8 minutes to try and give us their take on the question. I will then open the questions to from the floor and general discussion. So starting off with you, Rhonda, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, George. Just so everyone knows, I have actually compiled a list of resources and a document for George to distribute at the end of today's presentation. So what I'm about to share, I have got, so you can have that for your own discretion. Just when George said about how long is this going to last, I think certainly we have the privilege of working across a wide range of industries. And if I take a litmus test of what people are saying, that even with the recovery of COVID-19, most businesses are looking at 12 months to 2 years. So that's the time frame that I'm hearing from the majority of people, whatever the industry. We work a lot with individuals, with teams, with businesses and industries in crisis, whatever it be. Pandemic is just one of those. I always start, I'm a bit of an outlier here, but I always start with the premise, make the crisis work for you. It's the best time to actually make change is actually off the back of a crisis. And so the way I'm presenting this and talking to people is to say we are moving into what I consider is the new normal. And so my discussion today is around resourcing for yourself and resourcing for your staff. And I had the privilege of listening to Martin Probst last week in this seminar. And I'd like to segue from a comment that he raised. And it came from a quote from Manoush Shakir, the director of London School of Economics. And it was a comment when he said, in the past, jobs were about muscles. Now they're about brains, but in the future, they'll actually be about the heart. And I'd actually like to look forward, and I'd actually like to be right in the future now and talk about, if you like, the psychological impact and how we actually get out of and work out of COVID-19, I believe, is actually through the heart. So if I put some context around what people are experiencing right now, we know there's significant impacts in all industries, and but particularly hospitality. And Martin quoted some statistics last week, but there's been an update this week on those same statistics. And I pulled out a couple of key ones. One important one is 88% of Australians are actually feeling there's a significant decrease in their mental health. 30% have said they have increases in isolation and loneliness, which is no surprise given the degree of lockdown. But remember, what we've got to say on top of these figures is that people are still trying to deal with their everyday personal issues, quite apart from COVID-19. So, you know, that's important, that it's not just COVID-19, it's what's on people's plates already that is building. And a key group, I'm not sure if you saw during the week, but a key group that is really standing out as a great concern is our age group of the 19 to 29-year-olds. And the figures that came out last week, there's been a 10% increase in suicides in the month of April. So that's significant in just 4 weeks. So when George said, well, what are the supports and resources and what can we do about this? For me, there's really two main areas that can assist with moving out of and stepping out of COVID-19. One is connection with each other. And the second is the work culture. And for me, they are the key drivers around how we're actually going to move forward in this. And there's I consider four ways to do it. One is, the first way is actually supporting yourself and supporting your staff. And it sounds very basic, but it is absolutely comes to that point about the heart, that it's asking each other on a daily basis, how are you going? And it's not just that flippant comment, it's actually about how you're really going and that genuineness that comes in asking and caring for one another. And for me, and listening to people, and certainly we've had the opportunity of listening to hundreds of people since COVID-19 started, that's the one main thing that people from workplaces who may be stood down, may be out of work, are just wanting some form of connection and some way in which people they're feeling supported as in a genuine way. The second is very much about coping with change. And I think it's really important to look at some practical strategies on that. If I take the hospitality industry in general, and please bear with me, I'm making some fairly generalised statements here, and you can drive holes in this. But if we looked at the personality styles of people in hospitality, there's one big group who are obsessive and driven. And that big group are actually quite challenged by change. And what you find is when there is turmoil, they either bottle up, and so therefore they internalise everything, or they blow up. And so what happens is they have no tolerance, they're snappy, they yell at anything and everyone. For that group, it's really important, if you're dealing with those types in your workplace, it's really important to structure all your plans, to actually speak in very small steps and chunks, and plan only with the facts, because that's all they'll deal with. Otherwise, they'll shoot you down on anything else. The second group are your visionary people, your creative people. And usually they are actually very adaptable and very flexible thinkers. And they are gold for you during such a crisis. And I really encourage you to identify anyone you know to help you who has that style of personality, because they can come up with the really excellent left field solutions, and you can apply that in the workplace. And so for me, it's really important to capture both groups and deal with them in very different ways. For me, the third point is about communication. And, you know, I bang on about it a lot, and it's I say to people, communicate, communicate, and communicate. And it doesn't matter if you're saying the same thing over again, but it's important in a crisis to let staff know regularly, or anyone you're dealing with, what you know, what you don't know, and what the next step is. And It's really important. You can just be a broken record and that's all you say in those 3 key points. And that gives security to people because they know you're not just making it up. And so that brought me into thinking about what are some do's and don'ts that are really practical here for the hospitality industry and for chefs and for all the people you're working with. And for me, it's do take things in small steps, do lead with simple and honest and clear decisions and facts, and only deal with the facts. Do walk the talk. Don't overpromise. Don't waffle. Don't overcomplicate. And don't fake it, because people see right through that and you lose them rapidly when it comes to trust. In the list that I've given, I've actually put down a lot of supports and resources for counselling, for self-care. What I find are really great are the nice TED Talks, because they're nice and quick, punchy, got a few key points, and some really key articles relevant to the hospitality industry that have come out from mental health guides and also from Workplace Australia. And so there's a whole heap there of good free apps and everything that you can just click on my links and you can download. And I'm really happy for you to share that list, and there's heaps of them. Share them to everyone that you would like to. And so I'd like to leave my piece for consideration is I consider all of you are really key leaders, and that how you show your heart, how you show your values, and how you make business decisions during COVID-19 will gain the trust, the traction from everyone who works with you. And the question that I'd like to pose for you to think about is, how do you want to actually be remembered as a leader coming out of the back of COVID-19? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rhonda. Terrific.
Rhonda?
Okay, over to Mark now. We keep questions till the very end, folks. We give our speakers the time to say what they have to say. So, Mark, please have the floor.
Thank you, George, and congratulations on this great initiative. And well done, Rhonda. Some really great points there, especially around the people. I think that's going to transpire to all industries, guys. So, yeah, it's great to chat with you all, people in Australia and overseas, guys. As you know, bit of a tough time for us all at the moment. I think in the Melbourne food scene, a bit of an overview, I suppose, in the Melbourne food scene, like the vast majority of restaurants out there in the last few years, they've really been struggling just to stay afloat and stay financially viable. So in some ways, this has given the industry a time to breathe, time to reset, a time to really work out where we need to be and where we want to get to in the future. So, and as George mentioned before, some places may not reopen, but that's may not necessarily be a bad thing in some ways. The market was oversaturated with venues, so rents were crazy through the roof. It was really unstable to run a business in Melbourne. So, and I've just bought a restaurant, guys, just in the heat of all this. Bad timing, right? Worst time ever to own a restaurant. So, but I'm looking forward to it. It's an exciting challenge as well, guys. So it's something I'm really looking forward to getting going post all this stuff. I suppose for me, if I look at in a micro level in restaurants and even in kitchens of hotels and that sort of thing, I really think it's time now for, and it was mentioned before by Rhonda about communication. I think that's what's going to be really important is that owners of restaurants, managers of hotels, senior level managers communicate more with next level managers down to staff, down to all levels, to actually let them understand and share information with them on how the business is doing financially, some of the costs that are involved in running businesses, whether it be rent, overheads, equipment, all of that sort of stuff. Just to make staff aware that in the end of the day, we're running a business, and if we can't run the business, we cannot pay staff. So I think that's something which has been held back. I know from places I've worked for in the past. So I really think communication and sharing of sharing of where the business is really at is going to help a lot. And it's going to help staff make decisions and realise that every time they throw that, overcook that $10 steak, that's money, which is going to the bottom line, which, it's going to affect us. So I think before we talk about, some of the IT, support that we may need, I suppose we all know that there's definitely going to be some staffing issues, and businesses are going to be reluctant to hire permanent staff. Reluctant to hire chefs on full-time roles, which is going to be a tough time for chefs because there will be plenty of jobs out there, but many employers, we're already moving down this path already, where we're having a more fluid, more flexible workforce, which is great for the owner or for the business, but job security for a chef where maybe doing 60 hours one week because it's busy and then all of a sudden there's nothing in January. It's not great, but I think that's going to be the way of the future, guys, especially for the next few months. And the key there would be to build a casual work pool that you can actually give enough hours and still have that sort of full-time type of culture in your kitchen team or in your hospitality. And that's front of house as well, guys. So we all need that security, but I think it's going to be a tricky one at the moment. JobKeeper is an interesting one. I think that's keeping people afloat at the moment, but who knows if how that's going to affect us in the future. And there's already talk of that one winding down. So still more to be seen on that one. I suppose the main thing I'm sort of putting out there with my restaurant Normoyle, guys, is now is the perfect time to review our operational hours, where we're opening, what we're doing. Do we need to be open certain days? Do we not? How can we basically how can we make every hour of that restaurant count where instead of just being open? You know what I mean? So that's an important one for us. And obviously, and we mentioned people before, look, this will fly one, doesn't matter post-virus, pre-virus, having the right people, training them, culture, all that sort of stuff is going to be paramount and probably even more so in the future. It sort of goes without saying, guys. Some online resources, which I think we do actually, obviously we need, but which are there already, especially in Australia, guys. Restaurant Caterers Association, they have around about 35,000 members here in Australia. They actually have some great resources for chefs and managers as well. So it's not only for like restaurant owners, they keep their websites updated really well with changes and everything. They're a voice with the government as well. So they actually government communicate with restaurant caterers. So I think that's a great resource for chefs of all levels to tap into and even push their restaurant manager or their owner to get involved. The small weekly cost, it's a great one. And part of their website is actually for non-members as well. So people can jump on there and see the latest updates that's happening in the industry. And I suppose industry association, George's going to talk more about them, I suppose, in future ones. But even currently now, I know the Australian Culinary Federation is doing some great work updating websites as well. And that's probably essentially for the younger chefs as well. There are more senior chefs as members, but I think that's a great one, and we just need to spread the word on that. Something which I see is really important is obviously keeping our staff safe, and not only our staff, but our customers safe and confident that they can actually come back to us. There's a lot of predictions that business is going to downfall, and it's going to take us a long time to get back to where we were previous. So there is the government websites have some great information on where we need to get to with food safety and those types of things moving forward. And we almost need to create our own new normal and not just get back into there and open our kitchens. I know for a fact from talking to people in some of the catering industries and also in manufacturing that regulations with food safety restrictions are going to become a lot stricter. And as soon as we get back to relatively half normal, the council will be having more resources to come and inspect food premises. So hop on to foodsafety.vic.gov. It's a great resource for what we need to do moving forward. Also, the Australian Government website and Safe Work Australia has some great information for end users, as in chefs, staff, but also for business owners as well. So online resources, I think there's a lot out there, guys. I just think what we need to do is try and share this information and make sure that people are aware of it. I mean, these days we've all got our phones, we've all got our all our tablets and all that sort of stuff. There's a lot of information out there. We need to make sure that we're also consistently researching, I believe. And it doesn't matter if you are a senior manager or just a line person. We need to encourage people to get on and be aware, so that when we open, we can get back to normal, guys. I suppose, and the other one, which is really important, is from my point of view, is our next generation of chefs and young people, guys. We need to encourage businesses and ourselves to keep hiring apprentice chefs. There's some great subsidies out there. You can basically receive like 50% of an apprentice's wage for 9 months, returned back to the business. I think we need to still engage with TAFEs, some great TAFEs and learning institutions to make sure that we're offering training to young cooks and young chefs. And that can actually be a source for your future chefs as well. So I just think the industry just needs to keep communicating, talking together and making sure that we're going to be viable for the future, guys. So that's my little brief. I'm happy to share it with you guys. Looking forward to some exciting times ahead. And yeah, great to see you all.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Over to you, please. Where's he gone?
I'm here, George.
There, Shane.
Yeah.
I thought, oh my God, he's dropped out.
No, I'm good, George. I thought I dropped out there for a minute too. But thank you, everybody. Thank you, Rhonda and Mark. Your reports and your points of view are amazing, and I think it's just so wonderful we're able to share these thoughts at a time like this for everybody here. Again, work together to move forward. Back to business as usual, and what will be the implications for us all going forward, short term and long term. And Rhonda, you offered up some wonderful advice for us on how we can go about accessing some information that we can make some positive changes. Mark, also some really wonderful resources and things we can tap into. And just your insight into the industry in Melbourne is a really good thing at a time like this. I'm in Brisbane, and I'm in touch with a lot of young chefs. I train a lot of young chefs, apprentices, young emerging restaurateurs, and they all have spoken to me, and they all hold grave fears that will they even be able to sustain a business after COVID? Will they have a job at the end of this? And most of them are finding that they have to be thinking about new ways and things to bring value to our customers. You know, how do they go about modifying their businesses to suit a rapid change, and something that they just weren't ready for? So that can take a lot of resources out of a young business, as you know. The value of our industry on tourism and economy is massive. We all share this commonality, where our world cultures, where food and hospitality is the true heart of that, and we've all benefited from that. We've all been able to work with chefs from all over the world, share ideas, and share skills. And I think, you know, our global recovery from COVID is going to require we revisit a lot of those communications, so we can restore them and sort of share notes and thoughts on things like this. But, you know, with our industry, all differences can be pushed aside. We know that. And we can all share our commonality, which is our food and our professionalism in our trade. It offers trust and knowing into any one of our conversations. So will we get through COVID? Will we recover? I'm pretty sure we will. We're pretty resilient as chefs. But like the previous panel members said, it's going to look totally different than it looked a few weeks ago. It's going to change, sometimes drastically. But you know, we've all run businesses, and we all know that, you know, we've all had to run things on a tight shoestring. We've had problems with employees, and we've had to sometimes support employees living on a tight shoestring, living from paycheck to paycheck. But we did that because we knew they were good, skilled chefs, you know. So restaurants are known to sometimes live from sale to sale. Just putting that into context, a day or two without customer trade, we can get by. 1 week without customers, it starts getting tough. But maybe we can just get by. 2 or 3 weeks after, it's difficult to survive, and up to a month, and we have to think about closing our doors and losing some of our valuable staff. So that's the reality of it. Any other industry sectors, they can survive up to 6 months or more. But we can't say that we are that lucky in our industry. You know, with our net profits just barely able to survive. How do we do it and be profitable enough to pay and keep our good employees? And, you know, also put some away for when a bad storm hits, like COVID. But like Rhonda was saying before, what can we, the thoughts that I was thinking about as Rhonda was presenting there was she always came back to the thing about communication and trust. And I think communication and trust in our employees, our staff, but also in our customers. You know, the first overriding issue is running our business is the relationship of fear and trust we have with our customer. You know, for decades, our industry has just strived to form this level of trust between our establishments and our customers, for instance. So these days, there are very few guests walking through our doors that are fearful that they are not going to be looked after and treated in a safe manner. You know, we have customers coming in because they know us, they know our food. Some customers become almost like family to some of our businesses. The food they eat and the relationships they make with the staff won't make them sick, and that is all based on trust and communication. We've developed this high level of trust so people from all walks of life have an assurance that they're going to have a high level of hospitality. Those come from chefs' high level of training and understanding of implementation of high skill sets and the processes involved. So,
thank you very much, Shane. I'll give one another minute, or you're right.
Yeah, just another minute, because I want to give you some thoughts on solutions through it, George.
Please.
So that whole scenario might not be the case in our immediate future. So what we have to do when we reopen our doors and things get back to normal, we're just going to have to start building up that trust again with our customer. You know, the overwhelming feedback from global culinary educators' viewpoints who I've been talking to all around the world. We have a very highly regulated, well-developed primary food safety legislation at our core of our business operations. Hey, so we're going to see far more, like Mark said, we're going to see such a far more stringent food safety and sanitation requirements, regulations, and this is going to be driven globally. You know, what we're doing at the moment in Australia, we're sort of a little bit behind what's going on with the COVID outbreaks from all overseas. So we're in a very fortunate position. We can watch on and we can learn. So we're going to have a lot more demand on us, and we're probably going to have to retrain and upskill. But what does it look like? It's a good position to be in as a professional chef, to be able to say we need to implement some things now. We will implement this even if it's not mandated. So we have to start thinking about ways we can be smart with our food safety and sanitation. Just for instance, how will we go about receiving our stock? What are we going to do? Are we going to have a separate area that we're going to have to wash and sanitize all of that stuff? Are we going to have to handle the cardboard and the plastics in a different way? You know, looking at different ways and thinking about them now, it's going to mean that, you know, we're going to be able to share all this information and implement it a lot sooner to make it easier for us. Anything else? What I wanted to do is I wanted to let you know about where we're at as far as with our training institutions go. We are training online. We're training students online at the moment in their theory units. We are starting to implement and also we've got a backlog of practical classes which we have to get through. But I was talking a little bit before we started about how we're implementing temperature checks and body checks for all of our students. And I think that might be a little bit of a precursor of what's going to happen with, say, chefs who are working in hospitals and institutions as well. Because I know I've got a couple of students that are working over at the Gold Coast Hospital there, and they're the same. They can't turn up to a shift without having temperature checks or body checks, just to make sure they're well. And also that's going to mean, like, you know, more regulated health checks of staff. So a statement of wellness, a doctor's certificate or something like that, just to say, right, I'm well, I can function in the kitchen, you know, going to have a better effect anyway for us, I think, long term.
Thank
No.
you very much, Shane. Now we'll have a view of the world from China, which I think is fantastic. If we can, where have you gone, Alan?
Right here.
Ah, there you are. You've moved to the other side of my computer. Welcome and thank you very much. Could we have your points of view, please, as to what we should be doing and thinking about?
Well, George, let me first say thank you for inviting me. It's a great honor to be part of this panel of such distinguished people from the hospitality industry in Australia. I think Shane brought up some amazing and very important comments, which I'll elaborate on further about how we here in Shanghai are dealing with going back to work. And Mark, some great resources there. And I'm going to share some resources and things that we're doing in China, which I'll send to you, George, that you'll be able to use and send out to people so they can see how we're educating here and what online things we are doing. I'll elaborate on that a little bit further. And I think for all the other panelists, and Rhonda included, I think that it was really nice to talk to you and meet you all today. And I really love your comments about communication. And at Disney, we're a very communicative company. We are very much involved in each other's business. We don't work in silos. We all work very collaboratively together. And that really creates an environment of those creative people whose voice can be heard over the noise of those louder, perhaps more aggressive people. At Disney, it's a very creative company, so we're always thinking about new and interesting ways of doing things. And training is extremely important to us, which you also touched on. And I think, Rhonda, you hit the nail right on the head when you were talking about communication, which was also mentioned by Shane. It's about trust and it's about communication. The media juggernaut that we've been dealing with over the past 48 hours, having just opened the resort. Every media outlet in the world has been here, and it's been challenging at best to manage them. But they're telling the good story. You know, they're telling them what the guests are doing, and our guests are behaving quite well. Social distancing was the recipe for success here. Setting it up and being very clear about communication with the guests, creating barriers between one guest and the next, both left and right and behind and forward. And it's been challenging to set it up, and each location is different. I have 47 kitchens, and it can be challenging because not every location is laid out the same, of course. They're all different because they're all heavily themed. And so setting out all those guidelines and how we put up barriers and how we had sanitizer available for people and how we communicate to them has been a huge undertaking, to say the least, let alone having to rewrite operating guidelines for cast members, our employees, our cast members here, for them to be able to learn the new tasks and how to communicate with guests if they say, oh, I think I have a high temperature. What do you do? And, or, you know, there's somebody who might have a challenge or they don't meet the QR code requirement. So we have done a lot of training around that. So how do people come to work? They don't just have their temperature taken, they also have to have a QR code. I'll just pull up an example of it to show you on screen. In China, the government and let's say their telecom all got together, and everybody knows you can be tracked by your SIM card, right? Yeah. And so they determined that if you have a green code like this, that means that you've been in Shanghai for the past 14 days and you haven't been to other areas. If it's yellow, you might have been on a train yesterday and somebody got COVID, but you were smart enough to scan the QR code that's in the train carriage and they know that you were in that carriage and they're able to put your code to yellow. They'll come and see you have your temperature taken, and take care of you if you need to be taken care of. So it's really having those kind of systems in China. There's good and bad to it. You know, there's obviously some advantages of being able to have a compliant population that's easy to control. Technology. So there's the advantage that China has in that regard. And again, as I said, they're a very compliant population. Just turning now to education and what we're doing online. In China, we use WeChat a lot, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. I know Dale Lyman and some other people on the call here have WeChat, and we use it all the time. We also use TikTok, which is very popular throughout the West, and particularly with young chefs and young people in general around the world. So with TikTok, we're able to do live masterclasses, broadcasting. It's just like Facebook Live, if you like. That would be the Western analogy. And we're doing classes here in Shanghai for quite a lot of people. So myself and the chefs from the Shanghai Restaurant Association, as well as the China Cuisine Association, we do classes on a regular basis. Last month in April, we did 8 classes and had more than 1.4 million people watching us. So the populations are large, the reach is large, and we're able to get out to people, which is really very fortunate. On top of that, a lot of classrooms, as you mentioned before, Shane, is not just theoretical, but practical classes are going online.
Yeah.
And people are doing them in their home kitchens in Zoom classes. So it's really quite fascinating.
Yeah.
And we've learned to do things in a new way. So rather than, it's easier to see the negatives, we're just trying to focus on all the positives. And there's a lot of stuff which is coming out. And I think that we will live our lives differently in the future. We will go out differently. We will think twice before going to the market a second time. We'll do all those things that we need to do and order more things from home. I want to change subject again and talk a little bit about the industry here, because it's coming out of COVID, as you are all in the middle of it, and some other countries are still going in. What's happened in China is very interesting, and it happened overnight. Basically, all the restaurants that have seating turned into doing home deliveries, and I'm sure that that's happening in Australia, no doubt. But many brick and mortar locations, if they're on a main street, like in the United States, it's also happening there, they're turning their restaurants into marketplaces, you know, where they're baking cookies and baking cakes and baking other products, and then people are coming buying them and taking them home, as well as even selling raw material. That's also happening. They're selling coffee beans and all sorts of things. So it's been extremely interesting. The market has changed dramatically in Shanghai, and many restaurants have closed. This is a city of 23 million people, and the China Cuisine Association has over 6,000 restaurant members. So it's a very large industry. And we've seen a lot of restaurant closures, and as Mark alluded to, that's not necessarily a bad thing in some ways. There was an oversupply. Rents, just like Sydney and Melbourne, are quite extortionate in Shanghai. And so hopefully there's going to be some equalization, and hopefully there's going to be the quality, we hope, will rise. You know, and we're seeing that already. The best restaurants are reopening, and Shanghai is beginning to open up. As I said, a big sign is obviously Shanghai Disney Resort is a major milestone for the city to be able to open up. As I said, we employ over 10,000 people. And so that's big news, and it also indicates that things are definitely much better here. Shanghai has not had any local cases now for over 32 days, and yet we waited this long before we did any moves. And as we have done our first move, where we have 10,000 guests and more in the park today, but that will only increase by a value of about 5,000 per week until we reach our 30% capacity. But by then, we estimate the government will start loosening up a bit more, and we'll be able to take more. I'm also happy to share with George, so he can share with everyone in the group, some PPT material to show you how we set up our restaurants, how we communicated with guests about what table to sit on, what not table to sit on, and all those kind of things. So for all your industry partners that are on the call here today, and anyone that George wants to send it to, you're most welcome to, George.
I'll put it on the website.
yeah, I'd be happy to share it with everyone, some information about signage and why we chose certain signage and how we did what we did. So I'll follow that up after this. But basically, that's what's happening in Shanghai. And there's a lot of resources, there's a lot of things going on. And now that we've all met, please feel free to reach out to me at any time for anyone on the call here. And thank you again, George, for allowing me the time.
No problem, and thank you very much. That was very, very interesting, and I'll be very pleased if I may, at this point, ask the 4 presenters, could you give me a bit of a summary of your presentation, please? Because unfortunately, I dropped out there for about 10 minutes. My Telstra here is having a heart attack like the hospitality industry. It's about the same thing, but I managed to get quickly back online. But if you can give me a summary and send me a list of resources, what you will find that by the end of this week or early next week, I shall put that on as an adjunct to what we already have as session 1, we call session 2, where people can watch the video as well as look at your resources, if I may. Is that okay with the 4 of you?
Yep.
Thank
Completely.
you. Now,
100%.
what about general discussion? We're moving on. A person I'd like to get a view of, a very well-known and personality, chef and owner operator of a very, very successful business right in the center of the city is Tony Rojalski. Tony, being both on both sides of the fence, you know, he's been in the management area as well as being in the preparation area, and is actually going back on the pen sometimes. I know that myself. Tony, what's your take on this situation, and do you have any questions of the panel that you'd like them to expand upon?
Well, thank you, George, for the invitation. I wasn't expecting it. You've caught me off guard, but I have got a few questions. I was getting a number of questions ready for Mark, actually. I was just wondering if Mark has already committed to a new business, which I think is pretty exciting for him. I've got to say, I'm just very pleased that I'm not in it anymore. And Dale asked me a private question. We were communicating privately while the meeting was going. And he just happened to ask me how I am. And I said to Dale, I said, actually and literally never been better, Dale. And I'm afraid for everybody that's having a bad time, for me, I've never had a better time than I'm having at the moment. So I'm anyway, that's beside the point. But I was going to ask Mark a few questions if I could. I was going to ask him if he presently is, because of his unique position that he's just started in a new business, is he on job keeper or is he on job seeker? That's the first question. The second one is, as far as starting his business or getting it going again, doesn't he have to wait for the government to say when, or particularly in Victoria, I'm assuming.
Yep. You still there, Tony?
Oh, he's froze.
Ah.
He must be Telstra as well.
Yes, definitely.
I'm not sure if you can hear me, Tony, but I can answer the first question anyway. I'm actually not on job keeper or job seeker.
How does he think the business will respond to the limited seating that's going to be allowed by the government? We're assuming.
Yep, definitely.
Another one is, will you be, if you're in that position, will you be looking at the takeaway side of business? If so, how would you deliver, or do you just do pickup, or whatever? And another question, I'm sorry about it, but I was writing while you were speaking.
Good question, Frank.
I was just writing while you were speaking. I don't know how far into your new business you are, so I was sort of going to ask you what applies to you in your position as is normal. I don't know how you judge what normal is, because if you've just started, I don't know. Yeah,
yep.
That was another one. And you mentioned food safety, and I just wanted to understand, what has food safety got to do with COVID-19? But then I think Shane pointed out that even the deliveries, they have to be probably handled in a different way. But there are probably other issues.
Yeah, there are.
And anyway, look, that's enough. There's a few for you, Mark. Sorry about that.
No, that's all right, Tony. No, that's all relevant. I suppose the first one, I'm not on job keeper or job seeker. I've been fortunate enough to still consulting, and I'm doing some other stuff. You know, I have a couple of contracts which is ticking me over. So the restaurant itself is almost a side thing. I have another partner who's basically has another business as well, so he's doing really well. And I was consulting with him for a couple of months before he actually asked me to come on board, and I was seeing the potential there. So we definitely have been able to keep the business open just for takeaway only. I know a lot of businesses now, and you touched on before for your great point there, but a lot of businesses definitely will have to change what they've done in the past. And we have looked at takeaway as well, Tony, unplugging Uber Eats and looking at a more of a local micro style delivery service, where just focusing on the local community. I think there's probably more money in that. You've got these other guides who can ride around on bikes and deliver stuff these days. If the way we looked at that was if the local pizza shop can have delivery guys, why can't a restaurant potentially in the local area? So we looked at that. We definitely the business when we got it was actually run down quite a bit. So we spent this time now, which we knew was going to have a list to renovate. We kept the chef on board for JobKeeper. So we spent this time really proactively to rebuild the joint, get it freshened up, look at what our new, as you say, new normal is going to be. And I guarantee you all businesses, and like to mention the comment in Shanghai there about selling different products. A lot of restaurants now are selling their own, bulk packs of sauces and whatever they make. If they move to that model, I think we'll be doing some of that as well. And you just need to be able to diversify, Tony, and make sure that every hour that you're open, you can make money, and you can't just open for not making money. So for me, it's exciting because I've been a chef for plenty of years, but I want to use my business sense matched with the other partner's money, basically, to try and I've been making money for other blokes for so long time. So it's time to actually do it for myself, I think. Hopefully I answered some or most of your questions there, Tony.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Mark.
No worries, mate.
Thank you, George. It's enough.
I'd like to ask Melinda. Melinda Brown is from the education and training sector, and I think is a very important aspect for the future. I'd like to ask Melinda a question in the sense that, what do you see the take on future associations' activities to help your sector achieve its objective? What would you? I know we have a session coming up in about three weeks' time, particularly on training, but I just like, because of the relationship of this question, what do you see? What's your thoughts at the moment from hearing this particular session?
Well, George, I think you're psychic, because I was just about to put a chocolate in my mouth when you then called on me. So I will defer that until after this. No, thank you. Look, I suppose in terms of working with the associations, we do work with them a fair bit in order to do the consultation. For those of you who are not aware, I work for Skills IQ, which is a skills service organisation, and our job is to work with the nominated government nominated industry reference committee to review and update the qualifications, so your Certificate 3 and Certificate 4 in commercial cookery and so forth. Obviously, we do work through the associations in order to get in touch with their members, so cooks and chefs around the country. But we also do work, directly with stakeholders as well. I know that a lot of the associations are at the moment trying to work out how best they can address some of the issues with their members. And look, there's been a lot, you would all know, there's been a lot of suggestions on what people can do and how they can do it. I guess really, like other people have said on this call, it will be a matter of the businesses themselves working out exactly how they've how they want to do things in the future. And some of them have been able to pivot very easily into things like takeaways and things like that, whereas others, perhaps their model doesn't suit that, or that's not something that they can do with their current setup. So I think it'll be interesting to see what we get to. In terms of what we do with the qualifications, we'll still continue to work through the associations, but also directly. So again, as with the last call, if anyone does want to be involved or anything, you can always contact me through George or so forth. But yeah, I mean, it'll be, for us, it's a matter of collecting all the feedback. So that's why I'm grateful that you include me on these sorts of calls, because all the information that we can get that can be fed in is going to make a better product from the end.
Melinda, one of the things that strikes me is you go out there and ask for very good advice from a lot of people from associations. Do you ever take the opportunity of a Zoom IRC meeting there where people can actually see what goes on, see the transparency of the organization? Just writing an email out to 5,000 people and getting 45 answers, I think will have a greater impact by having 45 people actually watch an IRC board meeting in operation.
That's an interesting question, George, and thank you. That's not really up to us. I mean, we're the secretariat body, so that's up to the IRC to plan how they do their meetings. I know that sounds like a cop-out. You can read into that whatever you choose. But obviously, as you know, when we do the consultations, we do have an online tool where we can collect the feedback. We used to do face-to-face workshops, and hopefully we will again in the new normal. But we also do Zoom webinars where we have people who can get on and similar to this can be on and can listen to what's going on and make comments and use the chat and things like that. So we do a range of things. The IRC meetings in general, they don't do on Zoom because they do cover quite a bit of ground. I mean, that's not just this IRC, it's all of the IRCs generally tend to have their meetings with the IRC members. This one in particular, I suppose, because they cover quite a lot of ground. They cover all of tourism, hospitality, events, caravans, everything. So, you know, for them to invite stakeholders from all of those sectors, I suppose it would be a little bit difficult for them. Yeah, they don't generally tend to have those meetings in an open forum.
Okay, do we have any questions from anybody else in online? Hands up if you do. Anybody? Yes, please, Mark.
I've got a question for Dale Lyman, actually, George.
Yes.
Dale, suppose that you know, like you definitely know that in the last probably 5 or 6 years, I couldn't have run most of the kitchens I did in Melbourne without the support of all the international kids coming in. How do you see that now at William Angus? Has some of the international kids gone home? Is there some sort of prediction that there won't be as many kids staying in the country or coming to the country?
Yeah, so actually we had a meeting yesterday with one of the managers at William Angus, and he was saying that he's done a forward forecast for the next 12 months and redone it and cut it in half again. So the international students, we really don't know what's going to happen. A lot of them have stayed. I think we've probably kept, I'm guessing, about 60%. We've probably had about 40% defer. So we're guessing they'll come back into semester 2. So a lot of them have stayed, and you've probably seen a lot of the things on the TV about support for international workers. They don't seem to be getting support. They're not getting JobKeeper or JobSeeker, and how are these guys surviving? So it's a really interesting problem, and it's sort of just watch this space, I guess.
Thanks, Dave.
Anybody else would like? Yes, Rennie, you've got a question. Have you got a hands up?
I had hands up, but that previous gentleman just answered it for me. Because I'm a TAFE teacher, and we do engage in a lot of international students as well. And I also work for jobs. Oh gosh, I can't remember the name now. Just on the side, where we go out and do workplace assess international students. And the question I was going to ask is, I've noticed in the last, even prior to COVID, that our industry is becoming more with the international worker rather than the Australian apprentice these days. And my fear, it's not really a fear, but my concern is that with the COVID going on and a lot of these companies being strapped for cash, we're really somewhat an unregulated industry in regards to pay, working conditions. And the more I'm out in industry assessing these international students that are getting qualified, however, they don't go through the normal route of being an apprentice, more and more I'm seeing in industry that we're losing the Australian apprentice type worker just purely on work ethic and pay rates. And with the COVID, I know even now, I had a team meeting with my apprentices today and 2 turned up because the other, 9 are sitting back on their JobKeeper $750 a week, getting a lot more pay than what they were getting working on the tools. And I don't think these guys are going to come back. And it's a big concern for me because I was seeing it prior to COVID.
Yeah.
And now I think, I even had one apprentice today who said, I said, are you getting job keepers? And he said, no, my boss is making me work 3 days a week and I'm getting $250. I mean, it's just unregulated, where I find the international are more prepared to work their 70 hours a week for minimum pay. Our guys just aren't. And now with COVID, they're sitting back playing PlayStation, $750 a week, and they're just disengaged.
And my comment would be that scenario has been going on for a number of years now. It's got worse and worse, but that's been around for a long, long time. We've declined in the Australian percentage of apprentices, relatively speaking. I'd say, Dale, last 10 years.
Yeah, look, the apprenticeship scheme, particularly at in Melbourne, it's pretty well dead in the water, I think. I think free TAFE put one nail in the coffin and then COVID finished it off. So, a lot of these young guys and girls are going, well, why would I do an apprenticeship when I can do my Cert 3 and get, paid after that? That's a lot quicker. I don't know, being a traditionalist like George, we've had many discussions about this, and also, thought we love the apprenticeship scheme, but I can't really see it coming back in Australia. I think it's pretty, it's in big trouble. And 5-6 years ago, the industry didn't accept the Cert 3 international students. They just didn't think they were well enough trained. Now the industry has a fair bit of faith in the Cert 3 international students coming out. So, like we've all said, change, and there's maybe a lot of opportunity will come out of this, and it's just a case of being innovative in how we train people in the future.
Okay, Melinda, we'll take you as the last question because the time is nearly up. So over to you, Melinda.
It was more of a comment than a question and a comment. How can we get these young people back into it? I know that's the perennial question. If we had the answer, we'd all be millionaires. Because one of the things that we've been doing over the last couple of years is a longitudinal study into graduate pathways, I suppose, for people in cookery and also aged care, but we'll concentrate on cookery. And we started out with a group of about 600 students who had just recently finished their apprenticeship and gone into the industry, and sort of surveyed them in terms of what they were expecting and what they were hoping to achieve and what they were looking for in the first instance. And then we went back 1 year later and sort of asked them what they were thinking. Because, I mean, we hear all these things that it's because of pay rates, or it's because they don't like working Friday nights, or because the head chef's mean and all this sort of stuff. But are they really the reasons why we can't get our young people to want to do this, or are there other things? So we were exploring that. And I guess what we found with the second wave, and we've still got a third year to go back to ask them, there were a percentage of people who dropped out of the industry. There were a percentage of people who left the workplace that they started out with and went to a different workplace for various reasons. Pay was mentioned, obviously. That was always going to be something that we were going to encounter. But I guess from the people that we surveyed, a lot of them seemed fairly happy with the industry and fairly happy with their career choice if they were the ones staying in there. So obviously the students that are going through the training and are entering the industry and are staying in the industry are fairly happy. So what's going on with these other people? Now, we did ask them why they left or why they moved and things like that. And we didn't really get any particular answer. There was a whole range of different reasons, personal reasons and things like that. But I think that will be the key. And hopefully the third wave, when we go back to the third wave of surveying, might give us some more detail on that, sort of on the second year after they left. Because I think that's going to be the thing. The kids who are going into it and are loving it are staying and are really enjoying it. But we've got to work out what we do with that other bunch and why they're not, because that might be the key to working out how we address it.
Yep. Well, we certainly will address, I've made a note of that point, we'll certainly address that specific issue when we come to the TAFE training or the general training session that we intend to run. So that's a great one. So anyway, folks, it's 4 minutes past 4. We're 4 minutes over time. We must stick to our timetable because people are very busy. We're very honoured and fortunate to have and privileged to have people who are, you know, normally very expensive and very busy people to join this. And the recording will be there, which will definitely be, I think, popular in the industry. And so thank you very, very much, panel, for your participation. We're very, very honoured and privileged to have you and your thoughts particularly. Please, participants, all of you, I would love some feedback. You know, the only way we can make this a better platform is for everybody to say, hey, have you thought of this question, or can you do it this way, or this is the time I think is more appropriate. All those things really shouldn't be in the hands of just one person. I rely on a whole network of people letting me know what you think, because I can't change it unless you tell me that. So that's what I'm pleading for. Please, panel, send me your summary. That'll be important. You don't have to register for next sessions because you're already registered. I'll be sending out the details of the next session, which will be on the 27th of May. And I've taken a bold approach with this one. It's going to be a little bit controversial because I'm a great believer that the associations should either temporarily or permanently amalgamate in order to attack this crisis, not as individuals, but as one. And I intend to ask a panel to actually address that very issue. Why aren't the associations actually combining? Why aren't they looking at combining their resources to help everybody, not just themselves? I think there are some very important issues to be addressed there. And I'm sure we will have different attitudes, which is fantastic. It'll give us more questions and answers. Thank you very much, folks. We hope to see you again. And I'll say au revoir now, and until the next session.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
George.
Everyone.
Thank
Be
you.
safe.
Big up.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, George.
Thank you.
Adam, we want your TikTok.
We'll get that.
Your TikTok,
Adam.
We'll get that happening for you, no problem.
Fabulous. Thank
I'll
you.
send the whole list.
Great.